Ryan,
Tony, and Crystal.
We can't guarantee that you're gonna look great, but if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the Gymwits.
That's right, man. Welcome to the Gymwits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic.
And I'm Tony Marinici, aka Tips with Tony, your registered dietitian.
And we are the Gymwits. So another week of crazy COVID-related news. Somehow I thought, like last night, it's been a busy week work-wise, and I actually didn't think I was like, oh crap, I got to write an episode. And I even texted you guys this morning, and suddenly like it seems like we have a bunch to talk about. So what have you guys up to recently?
I'm just working, taking it day by day. Nothing new. Just the usual. That's pretty much my answer for everything during COVID-19.
Just normal, nothing normal. So
yeah, exactly. exactly. But
I've been
New York's been crazy.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that. For sure. Well, first off, on a positive note, I've remember how I've met. Oh, you know what? I don't know if this is going to be posted before the episode that I talked about becoming a chub rocker, but I definitely Tony makes a funny face.
Yeah, because you're putting yourself down and you're trying to be funny, but it's not funny.
So really I had just I wasn't in. If this episode gets posted before the other one, basically to fill you in, I weighed a lot more than I ever had. I was not exercising. I was just eating more than I needed to. I just wasn't really paying attention to anything. So as soon, basically, and I was traveling. I was back and forth a lot. So basically, over the last week and change, I've really made that change that I needed to. I've just been eating very well. In fact, I'll say what my diet has basically been. I'll start with what I've been doing, and it's been working. What I've been doing is basically eating however much fat I need to make my food taste good, but only really olive oil and butter. Nothing fried, and satiating foods. Although I do not that it's not satiating, but I try to do a vegan day once a week as well. So that's been fun, but I've been eating pretty well. Only, besides the condiments, nothing processed, nothing fried, very, very little sugar. As Tony would mention, lots of veggies, all whole foods for the most part. So not from Whole Foods, but Whole Foods. So I've been doing well, and I've already, like noticed a big difference how I look and how I feel too. I have more energy. I've also been able to do two sort of workouts a day. I go for a long walk, around 5 every day, and then I do either a long yoga or a bunch of calisthenics because I can't make it to the gym. So I've already noticed a big change, right? Yeah. I just always find it funny. I always harp back to the days where they talked about low fat was and I look, maybe for some people that works. I just always, something at the time never sat right with me, right? And maybe fat should be renamed something, right? Because like fat and fat are two different things.
You mean like fat on your body and the fat that you eat?
Yes.
Oh.
Right. They're like two different things, but
I guess what you're saying. I know what you're saying. It's not like, I hear you.
They're not the same thing. But logically it would sound good. Like if you eat fat, it makes you fat, but it just doesn't. It doesn't work that way. It's like we know that it doesn't. It's just not. That's it's kind of like when people say gluten, it has glue in it. It's like different.
Who says that? People say that.
People say that. Yeah. It's like
they say that it acts like glue, and
but the term, but it's a negative. But the word makes it sound bad, right? Like like fat in your diet sounds bad.
But it depends. Well, that's the thing. It depends on who you're listening to and what you believe. Like
I'm thinking more from a marketing perspective, right? Like it sound like low fat sounds good because you think like to a lot of people
pre keto days, like back in the 90s. Now fat's in. But the point
Yeah.
Now it's like in, but I do just want to clarify that all macronutrients are important, and a moderate fat diet I believe is probably, I mean, everyone's slightly different, but fat's important, but the excessive fat is just anything in excess, any calories in excess is going to cause your body to gain body fat.
Yes.
And gain weight, which is not necessarily good or bad. It's just that's what it is. So for you, it sounds like when you add fats, it satisfies you more. So you're probably eating less.
That's exactly what it is. I'm just not eating that much.
Yeah.
Right. And no processed foods and very little sugar on top of it. So
and a lot of what you're saying, you're feeling better right away, is probably a lot of like inflammation that you had, and now you're like probably even hydrating more, and it seems like you're you're doing all the things. It's not just one thing.
Sleeping better too.
And I think we're beyond fat being as much of a pejorative. Like
it's true.
Like
it's true.
It's been for a long time. Starting with Atkins and and just even now, with keto. Like I feel like sugar, and carbs tend to be a lot more of an area where people are like, oh yeah, I'm doing less. Like I don't really hear people talk, even in the marketing. You look, you see gluten-free, you see non-GMO, you see,
I know, fat. That's a thing of that's more of a thing
low
of the past.
Fat. We don't see you see low trans fats,
which is good, or no trans fat.
We don't see as much of a focus on like low fats, because I think it's to be low sugar, low carbs, gluten-free, organic, non-GMO, all that stuff.
Wonder what the next thing is going to be.
Well, you know what I've noticed? Protein has never really been demonized before.
Yeah,
I want, and I hope it doesn't, because it is important. But like, I just feel like that's never been.
I don't think
something that like, unless you're, I don't.
I mean, can you think of a diet?
Well, vegan is low protein, but they're not doing that on purpose.
Exactly, like they need more protein.
Yeah, they actually need it, but they're not like neglecting it on purpose.
Well,
it's not like trendy because of the lack of protein. It's trendy for other reasons.
Think from the perspective of like, if I'm marketing a fad diet, like if you go on a no sugar or very low sugar diet, you're probably going to lose a lot of weight really fast. If you go on a no fat or low fat diet, probably going to lose a lot of weight really fast. If you go on a diet that's like, all right, we're just going to do low protein, but you can eat all the sugar and carbs you want, probably going to be really hard, unless you then say, oh, it's low protein, but it's also vegan, and it's also,
with the right plant-based
like you can't really because that's the thing with a lot of these, with the fad diets, is it's like, we'll take out one thing, and by taking out that one thing, it can help somebody in the short term lose weight if we're just looking at that, but long term there are other effects. I feel like if you do that with protein, it'd be really hard. Like I think it'd be really hard to if you just eliminate protein, but you can eat whatever you want, that would be tough.
I agree. Agreed.
I think once they start lab growing everything, that will be the next fad diet, where it's like non-lab grown, like naturally grown. Like there already is the natural stuff, but like once we're only we're not that far away from lab grown meat, right? In our lifetime we will see it,
probably,
for sure. So there'll be a backlash against that, right? And then there'll be all sorts, right? Even if it's completely healthy, like, or not bad for you in any way, there'll be all sorts of people that jump out saying, oh, it causes this, it causes that, and so you're going to see a backlash towards that, and we always going to need something along those lines. But once the lab, for me, once the lab grown meat comes out, I'll make assuming it's affordable, that will be the majority of my, or like all the 100% of my meat intake once that happens.
I think that will be a huge shift. If and when it, not even if, it will happen. Like, we've got lab grown meat. It just costs insane amounts of money to produce, but there will be a point where you bring the costs down, and at some point you'd think it'll be comparable to just going to the grocery, and at some point it'll be even cheaper.
Sure.
And once they perfect that, I think, ethically it'll work a lot, for someone like me who's like, I don't know that I could ever switch fully vegetarian or vegan, but I'm hyper aware of how poorly we treat animals. And I would love a situation where I could kind of eat less meat, or eat meat where I feel like it's more ethically sourced. And so if you can, culture some cells and use that to produce meat, that would be awesome.
It's going to happen. It'll be better for the environment too.
No, absolutely. Long term, I think there are a lot of benefits from having it. So hopefully we'll get it sooner than later, but we'll see. So it was funny before we started. We had a few discussions that it was like, let's talk about it on the podcast. So you brought up the first question you brought up to me. Why don't you start it? I don't know how much it's fitness related, but we don't we can. I think with everything going on in the world, we could talk about a variety of different things, and get to fitness and nutrition when we do. But it was an interesting thing that I thought would make for an interesting discussion on the podcast, especially when there's not a ton to talk about.
So I'll start by saying that when I was in college, I took a class on crime and delinquency, and for one of the episodes, one of the classes, one of the projects we were doing was a discussion on whether or not this halfway house, a place that houses people that may be homeless or may have come from prison or have drug issues, anything along those lines, was moved into a community. And with a sense of coincidence, not irony, but coincidence, I always misuse the term irony, I was actually the judge for that because it was a trial in class of whether or not the town, the constituents wanted it there, and whether or not it should be allowed to be there. And I was the judge, and I was completely purposely completely biased towards the constituents, right? And I think people found it funny how biased I was, but I feel like that's what it would be, because if taxpayers, right, constituents, their neighborhood aren't going to want it there. The judge is supposed to be impartial, but clearly I was pretending to be on the side of the people that didn't want the halfway house there. So I voted that you couldn't put the halfway house there. And why that weird meandering story happened, why I mentioned that, is because this exact issue is now happening in the neighborhood where Ryan and I grew up on the Upper West Side. What's happened is, because of coronavirus and some other issues, lots of people that are homeless have been moved to the Upper West Side. We're talking hundreds of people into not a tiny neighborhood, but not a huge neighborhood. So the first thought is like, okay, well, people that are homeless, they need a place to live, and I'm fully for that. I do believe that there needs to be housing for people that don't have a house, and I do believe that that money needs to be allocated for that. So here's the but. We're not only talking about people that are homeless, that have lost their job and don't have a house. We're talking about people that are ex-convicts. Once again, a similar thing where people that have gone to prison do need a chance. I believe that. Here's where it gets dicey. A lot of these people are sex offenders being moved close to a school, right? Once again, that's iffy because right now the school isn't in. So, and you guys want to check it out, I'm just getting this information from the New York Post, which is not always.
There are other articles on it.
And there's other articles too.
It's legitimate. I think the New York Post might sensationalize like it almost words it like it's all sex offenders, where it's like, okay, it's homeless, and among the homeless there might be sex offenders.
There are some,
but it's not like
no, it's not like hundreds of sex offenders.
But no, I mean it's legitimate. Like there's a number of homeless people being held in a hotel. Yeah, sorry.
And there are a lot of people are drug addicts currently, which once again, if you know me, I fully believe that there needs to be resources allocated to helping people with substance abuse, but you're plopping them into a neighborhood with families, right? So it becomes a tricky political issue. And what's happened, and I've seen it with my own eyes, is people are on the street are getting harassed and being offered drugs, and it's not comfortable. So who do you side for, right? You lived in this community your whole life, and I know it comes across as sounding very classist, where it's like, oh well, I live in my cushy home, I lived in this, but it's very easy to say from afar, would you like in your neighborhood for a bunch of people that are not just homeless, but ex-convicts, sex offenders, and drug addicts to be plopped into your family when you go out to the supermarket, they're there. And And from experience, and while it's just anecdotal, I've seen a lot more of people that look or represent this demographic. And before we even get into anything racial, which there is a slight undertone of this, I'll say that that all people from that are being housed, it covers all demographics. So I don't know if that helps anything or not, but I'm that's it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
So I think there's a lot to discuss that we're not going to discuss because it is a fitness podcast. We do have some stuff we wanted to talk about. But I think to get to what you're talking about, and what's unique about my own kind of lived experiences is I grew up in Upper West Side. So obviously I grew up in an area that's much more affluent. But I also grew up in Flatbush and in a neighborhood that was not very affluent.
And the Upper West Side is not that affluent too.
It's pretty affluent. Come on. It's like, look at the median income there. It's among the highest in the country. So, okay. So you have an, affluent area. And I grew up in Flatbush, which was not affluent. And we did have a lot of, there were lots of families right in the middle of a lot of drugs, a lot of homeless, a lot of crime. So I guess my first question would be, where do you want to put them? Because, it's not, it does come from a place of maybe a little bit of privilege, having not dealt with it. But the way that you word it, it's like, oh, well, we're putting them among families. Like, well, yeah, they were already among families. It's just that they were among lower class families that just dealt with it as part of their own lived experience in everyday life. So if you start from a place of we need to house homeless people, where do you put that? And I think far too often, a lot of the negative, a lot of the negative aspects of society, those parts that the more affluent people don't want to see, they get to, by virtue of their own power in society, push that off to other aspects of society. So I think it's that you're seeing what a lot of people see as an everyday thing. It's the same thing as like what streets get fixed, what subway stations get cleaned up, what areas get better schools. Like I went to school in the Upper West Side, which is far better than going to school in Brooklyn. So I think it really is a class thing because, the question, like I said, the question I'd have for you is, all right, even, there are other issues to talk about with this, but as far as like where they're being housed, I would ask, why is it worse for them to be housed in an affluent neighborhood versus being housed in a lower class neighborhood?
So the first part to that is that they've always been housed on the Upper West Side. If you go on one street, I'm fully aware that there are hotels. In fact, believe it or not, there was
one across the street from my dad's house. Like where I grew up, there was literally one across the street. So I know that there are.
There's actually not a problem with them being housed. The issue is now that they were dispersed all over the city. Now you're bringing a very large group in rather than dispersing to across the city. I'm okay with some, and believe me, it's not like there weren't on the Upper West Side. Believe it or in my building, there used to be a methadone clinic where drug addicts would come. We used to have an armed guard in the lobby of my building. They got rid of that, needless to say, but so there have been. So it's not like there's a shelter a block from my house. Right. And as you mentioned, there was one a block from your old apartment as well. So it's not like they don't exist. In fact, they're all over the Upper West Side. So that's not the issue. The issue is now you're bringing a very large group and you're plopping them there. And as I mentioned, that it's not just homeless, it's people that are drug addicts and sex offenders, and you're putting them near schools once again. Near schools, near children. And I know that it's, why this neighborhood rather than the other, but so, yeah, and you are correct. It's like, well, where are you going to house them? And I think that the proper thing to do is, and it's reasonable, is to and look, I actually can't speak to this because I don't know if they're properly been, quote, dispersed throughout the city. But if lots of closing, it seems very unfair to one neighborhood to do that. While I think that it wouldn't be fair to bring it into any neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I would be personally, I would be just as outrage if it was brought into Flatbush or any other thing.
Well, I think that's the other question that we don't have an answer to is, I think what's happening is, okay, you have, there obviously is very little to no tourism in New York. So hotels are not being used. So this in a way is like a way to kill two birds with one stone. We can house homeless people, which will help with fighting COVID. And then the city can pay, whatever they're paying for the hotels. So the hotels get a little bit of money. We're keeping people, we're housing people. We have a big homeless problem that's gotten a lot worse over the last, 10 years at least in New York. So I think the question is, if it's all centered around that one neighborhood, that's one thing. But I think that, and the article doesn't explain whether or not it's like it's just the Upper West Side. It's like, is this just an issue of like we're doing it all over the city? It just so happens that the loudest complaints, let's say, are coming from there, or is it a situation? So I would agree. Like if we're housing the entire homeless population in one area, that's a whole different story from like if we're just doing it all over the place, and it just so happens that it's coming out of that.
Yeah, it's one of those tricky, those tough situations where it's easy to say, oh well, that you're coming from a place of affluence, you don't want people there, but then when it's your family, when it's my elderly parents that walk around who are like targets for getting robbed or assaulted or anything, then and by the way, statistics are that in New York, crime is up very, very high. If you look
so that's a little misleading. Crime, it depends on what kind of crime. So this goes to this is why a lot of the reporting has been a little misleading. So shootings have been up significantly, or a good deal. All right,
that makes you feel great, right?
What shootings? So shootings are up, right? But there are actually a lot of other crime that's down. So if you're looking at like trends, like let's say year to year, like the trend has been going down. That's the weird thing is like that if you look at crime now versus crime 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago in New York, all over the country, the numbers are always trending downward. But year to year, you might see an uptick in like, let's say you'll see an uptick in one thing, in
you get upticks here.
You're gonna see drops in other things. So there are a lot of areas where crime is still down. It just happens that yes, gun violence is up, but I think that's more of a statistical anomaly than it's going to be. And also like I don't know that it's real. And also the other thing is one of the articles I read on this specific issue is that crime isn't up on the Upper West Side from where it was like last year or where it's been. So that it might look worse. You may have people, peeing on the sidewalks, and offering drugs or whatever.
Well, that's unreported crime.
Okay, unreported, but that's a different story. But I mean,
right.
Then you have to make that, you have to clarify that.
So, which you can't, I know there's, how do you?
Yeah. So, but and I'm not saying those are good things, but also like, so I would refrain from necessarily saying crime is up significantly because it's not. And
I'm actually not sure. I have to look. I read a couple statistics that I can't quote that I don't know, but it is true. It is misleading. Although I have to. I'm going to get back to us on that.
Yeah, I can't get back to, but again, like I don't know how much more we want to talk about this, because like there's so much, there's a lot of issues dealing with our own criminal justice system, the homeless issue, that rents are too high, that in the middle of, there's a whole, in the middle of a pandemic, that if you like billionaires are making, insanely more money while people are suffering. So there's all kinds of issues, but you probably want to refrain from that for now. Unless you have anything else to say, or Tony, you haven't brought anything you'd like to add.
Well, no, I think it's just a larger issue that, it's definitely important for us to talk about because I think it's necessary to have conversations like this. But I don't know if there's really like an answer for us other than just hoping that everybody, I don't know. It's hard because, like you said, it's a big population of people where, a lot of them really do deserve and need a place to stay and shelter, right? But it's like that percentage of, this like things like sex offenders and, and it's sad because people who are struggling from drug addiction need like legitimate interventions. Like, so I guess the question is like, are these houses also providing additional support for those people who are struggling with a bazillion different, areas.
That's a great question. My guess would be, since there are lots of people now doing drugs and selling them on the street, would be no, or not enforced. So, but that is a good question.
Here's the thing also is how much of those are anecdotes and how much of that is real? I think that's another thing to
all of it, and there's no way to know, because there's no poll, it's not going to be any official thing, and I don't think you could properly do one right now. But I could tell you from what I've witnessed, and for someone who's lived on, and take that for what it's worth, right? Because I've lived on the Upper West Side back and forth since I was born. That to me, it looks bad. It looks worse than from a very long time ago.
And that's a New York problem. Like there is a major, issue in the city, and I don't know how you necessarily, fix it. And I do feel like obviously there's a big difference. I think a lot of times, it's like I've seen it so much growing up that you almost desensitized to seeing homeless people. And there's that part that's like, well, okay, how much of it was how much of it is like you're somebody who you just can't get your act together, because there are plenty of people who are just screw ups and they just can't get things right. But then there are people who like try everything and just have a hard time, and they just, a couple things fall the wrong way and they end up homeless. And in this situation, like with COVID, I mean, again, I think the government failed in not both states and the federal by not just putting, nobody has to pay rent, and no mortgage, because
instead of deferring it, so then you owe lots of money in the future. It's really ridiculous.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, so we can't like there's a more, like you can't evict anyone now, but as soon as that's lifted, mass evictions, mass homelessness, and many people who by no fault of their own, because at the end of the day, the other thing of like this whole, like, now I'm getting on a rant, but like the whole $600, that people are like, some people on unemployment are getting an extra $600 and the government's freaking out. Meanwhile, you got people making billions and billions and billions of dollars, but whatever, like, we're not going to tax them extra on what they've made during the pandemic. But it's like, if
borderline war profiteering.
Yeah, but it's like, if you can't, no, seriously. But it's like, if that $600 is so much, that better than what you were making, then there's a problem with the wage you were making.
There's a huge problem with that. Yeah, so, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. So like,
a lot of people have been expressing that to me.
Yeah,
which is really
so at the end of the day,
crazy.
It's a mess. And so you have a lot of people who can't, they're barely, able to live paycheck to paycheck.
Sure.
And now you're asking them to cover like 6 months of rent when everything's open back up. So I think we're, there's a lot of issues that this is just the tip of the iceberg, the issue in the Upper West Side. I'm afraid to see what happens if there, when the kind of that the pause on evictions ends, there are a lot of people going to be in trouble.
That's a really good point.
So, all right. So
now that we've posed tons of questions, we posed tons of questions and provided no answers.
No answers, exactly. Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, so there's, I guess to stick with some more I don't know that we have much positive until we get to some foods that don't require refrigeration, but we'll get to that. But I wanted to ask you, so Tony, you use TikTok.
Yes.
I know that TikTok's popular. I've never used it. So it's kind of a two-part question. First, I'd like for you to explain TikTok for me and why it's better, or maybe not better, but how it compares to like using Facebook or Instagram, and also how you feel that the president has decided that TikTok is going to go away in 45 days unless they sell to an American or a US company.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing about TikTok. I learned about it a while ago, and I remember being told, it's probably like almost a year old. So I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 months ago, I remember hearing entrepreneurs, anyone who owns a business, get on TikTok, get on TikTok, get on TikTok. They're like, remember back in the day when, Facebook was cool, and then people were on Instagram and you were like hesitant about it, and then to watch how Instagram blew up, and then now it's like you need to be on Instagram, and if you weren't on there early, or same thing with like podcasting, right? So it's like get in there. But I was like, I don't really understand, because to me, I feel like there's a bunch of kids on there, like I don't think any of that clientele, it's not like it's going to help my business really in any way. So I was super resistant in the beginning, but then I just kept hearing about things. People started sending me videos that are super entertaining, and I would always laugh or cry or like giggle or be like, oh my God, that's so like quirky and interesting, whatever. And so I decided to get on TikTok. I posted some videos. They didn't really get much traction. And then one day when I posted one video, it has over 100,000 views. And my profile doesn't have a lot of followings. And if you look at other people's profiles, they can grow really, really quickly, which is the benefit to being on a platform before it gets big. Now it's really hard to kind of grow a following because now it's more saturated and everybody's on there, right? So there's opportunities to go viral super, super easily. So anyone who's in business, it's super helpful. And then now it's been trending. So now it's not just young people. People of all ages are on it. If anything, it's actually really funny because they'll be like, you know, moms over 40 that like literally will hashtag moms over 40, and they'll be trying to do these fancy dances that these kids are doing. So it used to be more for like more dance. People would like do a dance and like you would try to mimic the dance and then you'd have like cool effects. And so the videos can be anywhere from like, they're usually around 15 seconds, but they could be anywhere from like 1 second to 60 seconds. But they're usually pretty quick, and they're usually either making you laugh, cry, or show you something. But also there is now, you know, my issue with TikTok now is like, just like on any other platform, you have these social media influencers that have no credentials that are just selling BS stuff. So it's just another area where these accounts can have like bazillion, like literally a million or like a million followers just by posting like, oh, this is the drink that I drink, and this is going to help you lose weight. And like, there's no filtering there, nothing like that. So that's the part I don't like about it. But I will say, of all the social media platforms that I'm on, I genuinely, Instagram is my home. It's like where I post the most. It's where I'm on my stories the most and all that stuff. I kind of play with TikTok a bit, but TikTok really is like, I never understood. I remember we would talk about like how you remember we were talking about how like we can go down rabbit holes, like watching YouTube videos or like Instagram or Facebook. I was never really like that. Like for me, I mean, maybe when I was younger, YouTube would be like, I'd watch funny videos, but for me, like I don't really enjoy watching people's stories on Instagram. I don't really enjoy being on Facebook. I kind of just do it for my business. TikTok, I will get lost in that thing for hours. Like it is so entertaining. Like I really want everyone to go on TikTok and just watch some videos because they're like, yes, there's famous people on there that post educational things and funny things and all that stuff. But my favorite thing is watching families come up with the most clever things, the most hysterical things. They're really just your everyday average Joe, like making these videos that so explain your life. So especially when the pandemic had first started and everyone was stuck at home, everyone got on TikTok and these videos were going viral, but they were so funny and so real because it was like it was describing like so many people would do videos of like them working from home and like the reality of like what that is and like, you know, how they would dress up from like to be on Zoom from like here up and like they would be not wearing anything, like, you know, wearing something like their pajamas underneath or like, you know, saying that they're not going to drink tonight. And then it's like, there's like videos of them like with like 4 bottles of wine later because it's like, what else is there to do? Like, you know, there's funny, cute animals. I am literally obsessed. Especially if you love babies, they do like so many cute like words or songs to, like babies dancing, and it's like trendy, and it's just so entertaining and so fun. So the point, all that to say, couldn't tell I really love TikTok. It's very entertaining. All that to say, now Trump is saying that it might be banned. And it makes me sad. And I think everybody who's literally, not for nothing, I also think about all those dancers and people in entertainment and all these people that can't work right now actually are making a living by creating a profile they're getting verified on TikTok and then they're becoming influencers, and so they're getting paid to do like sponsorships and stuff like that. So by banning TikTok, you are literally like taking away money from a lot of people. And you're also taking away joy from a lot of people because I really feel like it helps people bring people together during this difficult time. And it's just crazy to me because I understand it. I think it's related to because it's partly it's owned by China and they're afraid of them that they're going to get, our data and stuff like that. But like, I feel like, isn't that the case with most social media platforms? Like, isn't that possible?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
This is a situation of Trump being petty, like he's nothing if not petty. And, I think that it's, ostensibly it's because of data collection that they're, it's a Chinese run company. So or Chinese owned companies. So the fear is that they will use the app to collect data, but there's no real explanation of how and what about that is any different from any other major company, because like Facebook, I mean, the level to which, these companies can access our data and steer ads and direct ads to us is insane. And like, if we sat and took like a second to think about just what they do, what the social media companies do, with our data, we think twice about even being on any social media, and just the extent to which they can manipulate things. It's pretty scary, but we all just kind of go with it. So I feel like it's a little. It's BS that there's a fear of that, and like what about that can get to the Chinese government? So then does that mean that any app controlled by another country should not be used because anyone can use it? TikTok says that they're not sending the data to the government, but it seems more a situation of he was upset that I think whether or not this worked. Apparently, when there was that he had his big rally, and the numbers were a lot less than expected, and part was due to I think a lot of people on TikTok kind of buying up or taking you getting free tickets to the event. So they expected, like they thought they had millions of people signed up and that millions were going to be lined up out the doors, and it was only like 6,000 or something. And so it feels like it's a situation of being petty. And then the added part of, he said they have to sell to an American company, but then saying that if it sells, the Treasury Department should get a significant amount of money because they basically would have brokered a deal. It's bizarre, and I'm not going to get into a major Trump rant, but it just is. It is bizarre, but it's not unexpected because you could you can't expect the unexpected with this government. Nothing shocks me anymore.
When is
45 days?
Well, no. I'm saying, when is what's his name gonna come up with Idiocracy 2? You guys ever seen the movie Mike Judge? Yeah, seeing. I
mean, look, like you can't write like there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing you can write that is crazier than what is going on in the country. Like you just can't do it, and you just can't. It's not possible. Like. Yeah, there's nothing you can't do it. And now I had a little rant, and so now so anybody who's if you're a Trump person, I'm actually gonna talk a little bit my frustrations with our Democratic governor. So it was
kind of like another version of Trump, only on the other side.
Honestly, like it's funny. It's kind of funny because like if you look at so New York obviously got hit really hard, and largely so like I would say the federal government did a bad job of managing this right off the bat, and it's continued to, but I think that we're not off the hook either. And I think a lot, not that New York wasn't going to get hit hard because we're one of the largest cities in the world. We're a major hub. So I think New York was going to get hit, but I definitely think that the governor and the mayor of New York both did not do an amazing job initially managing it. They have done a good job since. And New York,
I think the mayor has done the most awful job. I think
our
he's
mayor
the
is
worst
also
mayor in the history of New York.
He's pretty terrible. It's like, I want to defend him because he's supposedly progressive, but he's terrible. So we could go on a whole thing. So like, if you don't like us because we talk trash with Trump, hey, we're gonna talk. We don't love our Democrat, unfortunately, in New York either. But no. So yeah, they did, but New York has done a great job since, and I think New York is one of the models for the country on how to handle a virus. But we're in this area where gyms are still closed, so now we get a little something talking about fitness. so gyms are still closed, and I think it's still up in the air whether I think it's a good or bad idea to open gyms. I think there are a lot of questions, and I think, there's a lot up in the air, because I think if you do open gyms, it does open things up to the disease spreading. But a couple days ago, Cuomo was asked, because we have no idea. So as somebody who's in the fitness industry, I am anxious, because like I am lucky that my company has been great and is paying everybody. But what happens, if this goes on for 6 months or a year, like, at the end of the day, at some point
And
it's
it
got to
will.
stop. And what about all of the people in the fitness industry who are not working, or who, have to hustle? And a lot of people are doing outdoor stuff. What happens when it gets cold? So
Yeah.
it's concerning that there is no indication of when this is going to happen, which also puts everybody in a rough position. If they were like, hey, we're going to open when the numbers are at this level, at least we'd have an idea. Or if they're like, we're thinking about opening in September, but there's nothing. And so somebody had asked him, and, effectively his response was, look, gyms aren't safe. If you look at the data in other states, gyms, it's proving that they have to close up the gyms again. And I don't know how much of that is true, because I don't know if there is specific data on how fitness centers and gyms are spreading the disease. I think it's that there are places that opened up early and they had to close everything down, including gyms. I don't know of a situation where a city opened up gyms and then specifically just closed gyms, as opposed to just, they open everything up and close everything. So the idea is, okay, gyms are unsafe. So first of all, hearing that response, I'm really concerned, because it's like, oh, well, I don't think they intend on opening gyms anytime soon. Which is like, it's like, okay, that's fine. If your thought is it's indoors and people breathing heavy, touching stuff, sweat, even with masks, it's hard to control. I get it. I understand how unsafe, how potentially it can spread. Fine. But then the next day they announced that they're opening schools.
Literally
So-
the next day.
So it's like, then, okay, so make up your minds, because schools are going to be far more dangerous and
just on
spreader.
so many levels.
And the problem is also that, we know that Israel, for example, Israel did an amazing job managing the virus. They opened up schools, things spread. We're looking at places that are opening up schools now, and numbers are going up. There have been studies out of, I think it was South Korea, that showing, schools being a major spreader. It's straight up that, yes, like kids may not suffer from the effects of COVID as bad as adults, but they still get it and spread it. So it's, it's just, it doesn't make any sense to kind of cognitive dissonance to on one hand say, all right, well, we're not going to open up gyms, but we're going to open up schools. I understand all of the other, there are other effects of kids not being in school together, but like, then be honest about it, but but I think really it's like, look, we need schools as, we need teachers as our unofficial babysitters. And to an extent, like, there are kids that they rely on school lunch, but work out some kind of school lunch program then, where you can have kids go
get it
get
delivered
their
or
food,
something.
exactly.
Mhm.
Like, or have the lunchrooms open, have the system, but like to just open up schools, and then without real guidelines, like they have basic guidelines, but effectively it's like every school district has to send him their proposal for how they're going to open. And then you have situations where, like, some kids can opt out of going in school, but then you have teachers now who have to both do work in this classroom, but also work virtually with it's just a nightmare and a mess. And it's frustrating, because, like, you know what, as soon as this thing schools open back up, the numbers are going to go up, and they're going to, I mark my words, like, they're going to close schools down again by
it's just
October.
ridiculous. There's no point in they should wait at least till maybe, I honestly, because I think we talked about this before, but like, flu season's going to be terrible. Like, I can't imagine it not be. So can't you just wait till like after that at least? Or like,
no, it's a great point.
Like, let's just wait, because you're right. It's going to open. They're going to open them, and they're just going to have to close them right back down. And it's true, because it's the kids obviously are at risk, and then they can spread it to like their parents or whatever. But the teachers, like, think about so many teachers the staff, like, it's just not fair to them. They probably, they're usually obviously older than the kids, so they have elderly parents.
Yeah.
And then, that's like, now what, are they not going to go see their family? Like, they already can't probably, but it's like, it's just going to make it even harder for them.
Yeah.
It's just,
and my wife's a teacher. So like, at the end of the day, it's like, it's like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to get it, because like,
right.
it's going to spread.
The family members of the staff. Yeah, exactly.
And on top of that, now you're flooding the subways with thousands and thousands of kids. Like now the subways become very unsafe for anyone who's forced to ride it for other, for reasons when you're not supposed to. So like, it's just the whole, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare of a situation. I think it's opening the schools is a terrible, terrible idea. I know that the other, I think it's a better. I know keeping all the kids at home is not good either, but I think it's a better option.
There are no good decisions in this, but at least be honest, and be consistent in your decision making. If you're gonna, if your focus is we want to keep the numbers down, and stay away from unsafe situations, great. But if you're gonna allow, like another thing is like, for example, okay, so we can't have indoor dining, but kids are gonna eat lunch or eat lunch in the classroom. Like, it's just,
and then also too, I feel like the other thing that might be a more realistic maybe strategy is like thinking about certain ages, right? Like you can't tell a kid like certain kids like are just not gonna understand. Don't touch your face. Don't touch anybody. Don't think about But like maybe certain ages, like maybe high school kids, maybe they're a little bit more where you could actually like control that or teach them that or but like those who have, especially, and I know Ryan, I know your wife helps people with special needs. Like that's really difficult. Like you can't, they don't understand that they can't touch people on a regular basis. So how are they going to understand that in this situation? So, and it's just going to be putting once again, the staff at risk and their family at risk. And so I feel like if anything, if there's going to be some sort of like controlled way where they want people to go back to school, the way to decrease the numbers would be selective of maybe certain age groups or you know what I mean, like or certain like high school maybe or I don't know.
I agree. I think I just think it's a recipe for disaster, and we're going to see one of the largest school systems in in the country. The subways. I mean, it's like it presents a nightmare scenario for a city that otherwise has been doing really well. I mean, I think we've had days, multiple days without deaths due to COVID. The numbers are still down. Like it just doesn't make any sense. And so then for me, it's like, well, I don't think gyms are opening up anytime soon. So if you live in New York, get used to working out outdoors until who knows when. Cause I just feel like by that kind of response, like if the response was, look, it's still, we're still not completely comfortable, but we're working out a plan with fitness owners. Even if they were like, like that's the thing is I don't think the government has not reached out to gym owners, at least as far as I know, to say, all right, how can we work out a plan so that when things reopen, we can do this safely? Mm-hmm. And I don't think they've even gone that far. And so, that's a concern is like, who knows when this is going to happen, but I feel like you can't say we need to, gyms are unsafe in one breath. And then the next breath say, we're going to open up schools. Like that just doesn't, it just doesn't work to me. So, I don't know. It's like a frustrating, but we'll see.
And to add just a little bit more doom and gloom, especially for the people that like to work out outside, winter is coming, and it has meaning, right?
Yeah, seriously. Well, I mean, like that's the thing is like I've been like for me exercise wise, it's been outdoors has been fine. I've been there've been good parks. It's hot and humid. Like today,
you have to get up super early, otherwise.
Well, I worked out today and it was like only 70.
Today is nice,
but it was so humid that I was sweating like I would sweat if it was like 95. It was just it's so humid. But it's like one of those. We're just gonna have to figure it out and get used to it. All right, so now we'll actually stick with fitness and nutrition. So we had some blackout. So we had a major wind and storm earlier this week, and it was really bad. There's a tornado warning, which is like you never see tornado warnings in New York. So that's how things are pretty bad. But it did knock out power for people. And Tony had a great idea.
Should we just go to sleep for the rest of 2020 and then, wake up in 2020?
It's not a bad idea.
It's been real rough.
That's the answer.
No.
Mass sleep. Like if everyone could just take a pill and like go to sleep for 3 months.
We will really go to sleep till election day. Everyone wakes up, votes, then we go back to sleep. So how about we do that? That would work for me.
That sounds like a good movie. That sounds like a very good sci-fi movie. Right?
Yeah. So anyway, so we had some blackouts in some areas, and then Tony had a great idea, which is talking about healthy foods that don't require nutrition. So why don't you talk to us about
Don't
that?
require refrigeration.
Or sorry, don't require nutrition.
Well, don't require nutrition.
Healthy foods that don't.
Don't require, not just don't require refrigeration, but also don't require cooking unless you have a gas stove.
Okay.
Then there's some, if some of your cooking equipment is like gas operated, then whether you lost power or not, you could still use that. But I'm going to just assume that you don't. And then if you do, I can talk about some options there. Cool. So I basically just wrote a list, and I just thought about when I go to the grocery store, and it kind of helps me figure that out. So think about when you go to the grocery store. Obviously, the first thing that we're going to think about that is healthy are going to be your produce section. So the fruits and the vegetables. So think about when you go to the grocery store, all those things that are not refrigerated, those are things that you can purchase. Now, some of them do require cooking, but others can be eaten raw. So the things that require cooking, if you have a gas stove, obviously that's fine. But most of the stuff that's out on the produce section that doesn't require refrigeration can also be consumed raw. So things like peppers and what else do they leave out there? Oh my God, there's so many, and I just can't. Lots of fruit, lots of veggies. So just think about anything that you buy that, avocados, bananas, tomatoes, those are the things that are out there that don't require cucumbers. There's certain things that you really don't need to refrigerate in order to consume, but they're both, fruits and vegetables are always a good option. You could also buy dried fruit as well to kind of add as a snack, or, have to add to, maybe make a trail mix or something like that. Nuts, seeds, and nut butters. Those are also really, really great options. Whole grain bread, rice cakes, popcorn, dry cereals. Obviously, the popcorn and the cereal, we want to make the cereal, we don't want to have too much sugar, and the popcorn, we don't want to have too much butter or salt. But even things like whole wheat tortillas or corn tortillas, or even, whole grain flour tortillas, those are fine. And then if you're going to have something like cereal, they actually have shelf-stable milk that you can buy. And very often, it depends on obviously if you're with the family or by yourself, but there's milks that are in little containers that are portioned for one person, or you can buy a whole container if you feel like you're going to share it between everyone. So obviously you would have to refrigerate it after you open it, but there's certain milks that you don't actually have to do that.
I think there is a non-refrigeratable milk.
Yeah,
like
there is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Marmalade or something like that.
No.
Doesn't.
But I think once you
open,
open,
is that? Do you have to refrigerate that after you open it?
Most of those I think it's suggested to. So I've just for food safety purposes, I would say once you open it, you would want to refrigerate it. So that's why I was saying maybe buy the ones that are already smaller packs. So it's more I'm going to have a cup with my cereal, or I'm going to have a cup, like a chocolate milk as a snack.
Warm milk and cereal. Nothing
I
like
know.
warm milk and cereal, but whatever.
Well, yeah.
Do what you got to do, right?
I know. And then another thing you could do is get protein powder, and you can mix that together and shake it up and have that as a snack. Or I use that actually as my milk in my cereal, because I use almond milk, which doesn't have a lot of protein, so it's a fun trick for you guys. So whatever, jerky is also good so those are more like snack options. But obviously canned vegetables is good, and also canned fruit. So with canned veggies, you want to make sure it's no salt added, or if you do, it does come in salted, then just get a strainer and wash it off with water. If it's canned fruit, then make sure you have no added sugar, or if it's packed in water, or even packed in its natural juice is fine. Canned tuna, sardines, even canned chicken breasts, those are completely fine. If you're concerned about sodium, like I said, just wash it off. But they even have flavored tuna and flavored sardines, and so that way you can add a little flavor to it. But also a lot of condiments that don't require refrigeration are things like vinegar and hot sauce and tomato sauce and mustard, and those might be good things or sriracha, depending on the flavorings that you don't need to refrigerate to give those foods flavor. Other things, roasted chickpeas, roasted fava beans, roasted edamame. Those are really good options. And then if you do have a stovetop, then you should be able to make things like oatmeal and quinoa and pretty much any grain that just requires some water, and maybe even some vegetable broth or chicken broth or something like that to give it some flavor.
Well, if you have a gas stove, you're
right. So if you have a gas
good.
stove, you're obviously a little bit better off with. But if you have to be mindful that you would have to then go to the store and buy small portions because you can't refrigerate it later once you cook something. But those are all options that are great. They're shelf stable. You can eat them. You don't need to cook them, prepare them, or refrigerate them. And you can make some really great combos. So you can get your tortilla. You can get some the canned chicken. You can put salsa is another good thing that's shelf stable. You can throw some salsa on there. Get some avocados, and that's like a pretty good, decent meal. That's one example, but you have to get creative a little bit, but it's possible.
It's fun. People did that for longer than people lived that way for longer than we've had refrigeration, like much longer.
Yeah. And then the other thing too is like, I think the first thing people think about if they have no power is to go like buy, go to fast food or go to a restaurant and like order in or take out, which is fine. But you definitely still want to use all of like the healthy mindset around that. Like make sure that when you are doing that, you're getting some veggies with it.
That's the next diet, the non-refrigeration diet, not the raw diet, the non-refrigeration diet. So like only things you can't refrigerate.
Yeah. But also too, when you do go to the grocery store, like you can, they hopefully they didn't lose power. And then you can get things like pre-made salads and pre-made sandwiches and like, then you could also just buy things that are, already, healthy and pre-made that you didn't have to prepare, which is obviously like the other option. But I'm thinking if someone's like, doesn't want to buy all of their meals out if they lose power for a week, that can get pretty pricey.
Not be fun to lose power for a week.
Did you guys have any ideas of, did I not say anything that you've thought about?
Did you mention peanut butter?
I said nut butters.
Nut butter. Okay, that's
Yeah.
right. You did.
Yeah. That's always the first thing that comes to mind. It's like what could you subsist on? Peanut butter.
Yeah.
Peanut butter's life. I feel like, so those are all really great options. We talked about fruits, veggies, proteins, healthy fats.
Chef Boyardee.
We said healthy.
Okay, fine.
Well,
wait,
you could pair that with some veggies. Yeah, if you pair it with some veggies. I think.
Who wants to eat like cold canned ravioli?
I actually do not mind cold canned ravioli, but that's a story for another day. All right, so I've got an interesting study. So this deals with this one is dealing with the so you get the big question, what's better for building strength, weights or machines, and it's this battle back and forth that we've had over the years, and you get the general thought has always been that weights, so machines give you a stable environment. So any kind of machine system gives you a linear, stable environment to work from. So the idea is that when you're doing free weights, you have a more unstable environment that you're working with. So you have a greater recruitment of muscles. So the idea has been that generally free weights are better because they're more functional. You recruit more muscles and you'll build more because of that muscle recruitment. And so this study looked at the difference between weights and machines. And so it was in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research. So what they did was they did over 8 weeks. So it was the study was done over 8 weeks, and you had two groups. So one group was doing only free weight training. The other group was doing only machines. And each group trained they trained each muscle group 2 to 3 times a week. They would do 3 to 4 sets per exercise, and they would do 4 to 10 reps. And the workout, the kind of plan would be 2 days on, 1 day off. And like one day they do half the muscle groups. So they might do, and this is just throwing it out, but let's say like biceps, triceps, and back. And the next day they would do like chest, shoulders, and legs or something like that. And then they take a day off and then repeat. So, for this group, they were testing. So the group consisted of 46 people. I think it was 20 men and 26 women, and 18 to 30 years old. So obviously you got to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt because you're doing a very specific population. They had a variety of training experience. So some people had more exercise experience than others, but they effectively tried to put them in groups so that like half the group had similar amounts of experience as the other. So what they tested was muscle mass. They tested strength. They tested free testosterone, and they tested free cortisol levels for each group. And so what they found was that over the course of the 8 weeks of the testing, there was not a major difference in muscle mass or overall strength. That they both increased, but they increased to basically the same amount. They did find that in men, their testosterone levels after post workout did increase significantly. So more so with the free weight training. So free weight training, testosterone levels did increase more per workout. Although that at the end of 8 weeks, it still didn't lead to a significant increase or difference in mass or strength. And then they found that the cortisol levels were basically the same. So again, obviously this is, very basic, very simple study, only, a certain age group. So we don't know how that affects older people. We need this to be replicated, et cetera, et cetera. But it is interesting, as it seems to point to there not being a major difference as far as if you're just looking to build strength and size between doing, the free weights and machines. Now, obviously, if that's the goal, there doesn't seem to be a major difference, which I think most people would agree with. The other questions would be if you're looking at it for like a sports specific thing, or if you're looking more for specific like outcomes that related to movement, there may or may not be, a benefit to doing free weights or machines. But if it comes to just building strength or size, there doesn't seem to be a major difference. But obviously, again, this is something where we need more studies to kind of bear that out.
I would also like to one thing in favor. If you ask anyone who's a hardcore gym goer, they're always going to say free weights for the most part, right? But one thing that Ryan, you could speak to this, is you probably get injured a lot more using free weights than you would at a machine. Is that correct, or is there no evidence that supports that? To me, you would think that would be the way, but perhaps I'm wrong.
I think you'd have to qualify that a little bit because, it depends. Like I would say, yeah, okay. If injuries doing a movement, sure, because again, you're in an unstable environment. So if you do something wrong, you're definitely more likely to injure yourself doing a free weight exercise wrong, because it's unstable and there's just a lot more freedom of movement than there is with the machine. A machine, it helps you so much that you're pushing it in one direction and back. So there's not as much room for there's not the kind of room for error that there is with the free weight, because the free weight is you're free. You can do whatever you want. And so if your shoulder starts, rotating backwards too much, there's nothing to hold that back. So I think that, when it comes to doing things improperly, sure, you're probably more likely to injure yourself with free weights because of that freedom of motion. You're also probably more likely to drop a weight on your foot. You're not going to drop something, you can't really do that with the machine. So I think that injuries are more likely, and this is just theorizing. I don't know what the data would say on that, but the other thing to consider is that could be used wrong, because then it could be used to say, yeah, free weights or machines are safer, but it's just that improper usage of free weights. But if you're properly doing exercises with free weights, long term, it probably, so that's the other thing, is you're talking short term versus long term. So if you're, the thing that people that, kind of free weight proponents might say is that by doing a machine exercise over time, you're not working, assistant movers as well. You're not working, kind of synergizers. You're not working antagonists as much. So you end up overdeveloping like the larger muscle groups. Like if I'm doing a bench press with, a machine over years, I'm developing my larger muscles. So I'm probably developing the chest and triceps, but I'm not developing a lot of the stabilizers. And so that there then becomes some kind of an imbalance where that could potentially lead to injury. So, a little bit comes down to like, are we talking short term versus long term? Probably short term, you're much more likely to injure yourself in the moment doing a free weight. But there are questions as to, again, how functional it is, and if you're not doing, are you doing a disservice to your body long term? So I think this study, obviously 8 weeks is very pretty short term. And it's not going to speak much to injuries, but this was only focusing on, can you build strength and size between the two, and there doesn't seem to be much of a difference.
Well, we often say that it's almost, well, I say, I don't know, Ryan, you sort of agree with me, Ryan, Tony, too, that it's almost more important that you do than what you do.
Yeah,
Totally.
I would agree. I mean, yeah, that you do safely, but it's more important that you do, than exactly what. And that's, I think I like that this does show that, because for a lot of people, they're not comfortable with free weights.
Right, I
And
was going to
if
say they're intimidated by that.
Exactly,
So it's good to know that they can still get a good workout
Exactly.
and improve their muscle mass.
Yeah, if you're looking to build some muscle and strength, you can do that with machines.
I doubt
just
they
as
have
well.
a machine though now. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Might be, well, if you're gonna buy, we did a little, we talked about buying equipment. So yeah, if you're gonna buy some equipment, that might be the.
I need to buy a bigger place, because I'm as this weather starts to get colder, my lease, I re-signed my lease, because when all this stuff was happening, I was up to get out of the apartment in May. And I was originally going to move out, but it was like in the heat of things, and there was just too much going on. I was so overwhelmed. And so I was like, I'm just signing my lease again, because I didn't know what to do. And now I'm stuck for like another year, because I have this 1-bedroom apartment and I need more space, so that I could get equipment, and also like I work from home, and so just like, it needs to happen.
All right. Well,
all right.
Yes,
this is a long episode.
Yeah, it was like I woke up.
We ranted.
Thinking,
sorry if you guys stayed with us the whole time. We really appreciate you.
I think most people know us by now. We can go on get on our soapbox when we need to. But so as usual, all of our stuff, we're on Facebook, Instagram, social media. Check us out, rate us, review us, and that's it. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Gilt, aka Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
And I'm Tony Marinici, aka Tips with Tony, a registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.
And we are the Gym Whips.